Hey, how's it going? I'm Nick, and I'm the host of the Echo Academy podcast, a podcast where we share tools and strategies that help make your life better. In this week's episode, we talk to Anja Chong. Anja is a Malaysian short track speed skater. Dubbed Malaysia's Ice Queen, Anja made a clean sweep at the Southeast Asian Games in 2017, where she won 3 gold medals in the 500, 1,000, and 3,000 meter ladies relays. Today, Anja opens up about her time as an athlete and how she looks at life post skating to help us understand how we should think about success, failure, and reinvention. To find out more about Anja and this episode, you can go to echo.academy/Anja. That's ekho.academy/ANJA. So, without further ado, here's my reflective conversation with Anja Chong. But I mean, we can just get started so that because you're already comfortable speaking, so that works. But I'm curious, like, especially for someone who comes from Malaysia, right?
Mhm.
How did you get into short track? And actually, let's backtrack a little for people who don't know what short track is.
Mhm.
Maybe you can explain what that is.
So it's very similar to, I guess, either maybe roller derby but on ice, or like cycling on a track but basically on ice. It's a bit different in the sense that in short track speed skating, you have around 5 people that go off at the same time, and you're all fighting for the same track. So it's not that everyone has their own individual lane, and there is a lot at play because of that. So there's a lot of strategy involved. You have to think about, when to go and when not to, whether you want to draft behind someone. And there is a lot of luck involved because if someone else makes this mistake and wipes you out in the final, then that's it. So it's interesting because there's a lot of speed, but there's also a lot of strategy involved.
Yeah.
And that's why I really love it.
I mean, I hope I'm not too ignorant when I say or ask this, but is there anyone in your year similar to like F1
No,
telling you when?
unfortunately, no.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would have been helpful, right?
But
To tell
they do
you.
have your coaches on the side of the board, and they do scream things.
Yeah.
But obviously everyone can hear that. So it is slightly different. But no, you're not allowed to.
Got it. So what made you get into short track, especially since it's a winter sport and, we're in a tropical climate?
So I actually started with figure skating. And I started when I was 9 at a birthday party. And everyone had been figure skating before, and I hadn't. And the then perfectionist in me didn't want to be the worst person. So I went to my mom and I said, look, can I get a set of lessons over my Christmas holidays? And my mom was like, okay, if you get a certain grade on your exam, then you can do these set of lessons.
Yeah.
So I signed up to these lessons, and then my coach said, you can do this competition. And at the time, I was in local school, and getting to take part in a competition meant a certain, level and prestige. And that was all very exciting. And it sort of just never stopped from there. So I did that competitively. And then sort of retired from the sport because there was a lot of cattiness, which I just didn't love. It took away from the love of the sport, and I just didn't want to surround myself in that environment and with that energy anymore. And so I took a year out, and then short track was introduced to Singapore in a camp. And I went a bit begrudgingly, sort of supposedly just to make numbers, and I fell in love with the sport. So, yeah, and then it's just been a journey.
And how common is it to have short track, I don't know, training, competitions and stuff like that around the region? I mean, because I would imagine for you to be able to do it consistently, I mean, it has to be accessible. So I guess my question is, how accessible was it?
So in Southeast Asia at the time, not at all. As I said, when I began the sport, it was just being introduced into the region. So at the time, we had no equipment, no proper rinks, no coaches, that kind of thing. Interestingly, though, Asia is very much a powerhouse. Korea and China are one of the top countries in the world at the sport. And it's interesting because unlike other winter sports, you don't actually need a winter climate.
That's true.
Because it is indoors. So there's definitely the potential, and there's the potential to make it accessible. And, the sport has been growing in the region for a long time now. And you're really seeing players in Southeast Asia really move up the ranks and be very strong. And I think in another 5 years, we'll definitely, be up there. Because Asians do have the right physique and body type for the sport.
Right. And what is that? Like lean?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, short track is a self-propelled sport. So being aerodynamic is really important.
Right.
And the Asian build is more aerodynamic.
Yeah. And are you more aerodynamic if you're shorter or taller? Just curious.
So interestingly, yes, it used to be shorter. But more and more now we're seeing people that are taller.
Yeah.
It's really just utilizing, I guess, different strengths. So if you're taller and learn how to do it right, you can also be stronger, more powerful. But it does lean towards smaller athletes.
Yeah. Because I was curious, because I think you're quite tall for a woman, and so I was curious because usually, especially when I look at, I don't know if it's a fair comparison. It probably isn't, but when you look at bobsledding and you tend
they're a lot taller and bigger.
So I was just curious if like weight plays a role.
I mean, I'm definitely on the taller end of the spectrum, and like my build is a lot bigger than a lot of other females that are competing. And weight definitely plays a role in the sense that it's always, your like weight to muscle mass balance, right?
Yeah.
The more muscle mass you can have without carrying that extra weight, because it is self-propelled, obviously is a massive benefit.
Got it. When did you decide that you were going to go competitive? I mean, was it an accident? I mean, because you were like, your coach saw like some talent, or was it something you intentionally decided to go for?
I think with short track, it was the right thing at the right time. I am a competitive person. So naturally, I always push towards excellence, I guess. So I think for me, it's more the struggle to work hard and do things that I know need to be done to get me to where I need to go. But I don't see that push towards excellence. For me, like when I commit to something, naturally, I want to do as much as I can to be the best that I can.
Yeah. I'm curious, and maybe this might get a bit philosophical, but how do you draw the line between excellence and self-harm, both mentally and physically? Because, I notice this more in athletes than just a regular Joe like myself, for example. When you're an athlete, because you're striving to be the top, you put your body and your mind through such intensity. And at some point, I feel like it's almost detrimental more than beneficial. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you know the line? Are you aware of it? Or is it something you're just fortunate enough to?
So I think, interestingly, I've had a very interesting journey, I guess, through the sport. And in many ways, I think it makes me stronger. I think naturally I struggled a lot with my mental health. And I think a lot of the reasons why the way I think is very different, and it's very deliberate, and it is learned. It wasn't the way I was naturally. And I had to learn that because of my mental health, being in the sport, because of the things I had to overcome. Very similar to when people make this comparison of hitting rock bottom. When you hit rock bottom, you really have to learn how to build yourself up from the bottom up.
Yeah.
And I think maybe most people never get to that stage. So it doesn't become so glaringly obvious for them to work on themselves and, work on their mindset and be very deliberate about their mindset and put in place the structures on how they should be living their life and really looking back and reviewing that as well in order to be constantly moving forward. So yes, sport has definitely brought me to some of the times that were my lowest and my hardest, and probably not the healthiest mindset and, mental space. But it has also what has fostered and created me to have a strong mindset.
Yeah.
So I think with everything, there's always a balance, right? Because of those tough situations, I really learned how to be stronger through that. And so moving forward, the way I deal with things moving forward is so much better because of it.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that as long as you learn how to be stronger and better as you move towards different situations, then those are all good experiences. And that's life. I think that as people, we need to constantly be growing and improving. And so I kind of always joke because, things sort of happen and I'm like, okay, that was a tough situation.
Yeah.
And I think life sometimes realizes that you're growing and improving and it throws you new and harder challenges. And it's like, okay, you've learned how to deal with that situation. So let's throw something even harder at you and see how you deal with this situation.
Yeah.
But I think that's how you grow to be a stronger person.
Gotcha.
So
would it help if, perhaps you can give like a clear example of that, based on a particular experience when you're going through, like when you hit rock bottom, how did you kind of pick yourself up from it, but also to make sure that when it happens again, you know what you need to do to, stay consistently healthy?
Well, for me, to be honest, the biggest thing, I guess, that rocked my life when I was going through university was I was raped. And I think it was hard for me because leading up to that situation, I always saw myself as a strong person. And that really, I guess, that was when I really hit rock bottom. And prior to that, I'd, been struggling a lot with my mental health. And that situation made me really look at my life. And I said, I don't want this person to win. I knew that if I gave up, if I acted a certain way, or if I let, my negative thoughts get the better of me, he would have, in that sense, achieved his purpose. And I never wanted to give that person the satisfaction of, breaking me down and having control over me. And that was the first real situation in my life where I really had to learn to build myself up. I had to really think about the way, my mind was operating. And at the time, that was the hardest thing ever. And in Asian society, that was so hard because it was seen as such a taboo thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was that people want to add hurt or want to judge or criticize. I think they don't mean harm, but they didn't know any better, right? So they would say things like, oh, well, moving forward, maybe you shouldn't dress or act a certain way. And for me, it was like, no, I'm not going to let these people tell me that it was my fault. And I think there is a lot of that in Asian society, and we're moving forward, but it is hard because we come from a more conservative society, but the blame needs to be pushed onto the people, and we need to learn to educate people and, teach people how they should be thinking or, about, consent, and teaching our sons and our daughters and how they should be acting.
Yeah.
And So that's why, when I said moving forward to being in Korea, that was a really hard experience for me because of what I'd gone through. It was something I was very sensitive, and I became very passionate about, women's rights, because I felt like, especially in Asia, that was something where there wasn't so much awareness, and, we were a little bit behind the rest of the world, and the mentality still hadn't changed yet. And so when I saw another female being physically abused, that was so hard for me, to just wrestle with whether this was the right path. I'd committed to sport, and I told myself that I was committed and I would do absolutely everything it took. But whether, it would change the things I really stood for and the kind of person I was. And that was when I decided that there were always two ways that you could approach things. And the reason I was meant to be there was to try and see if I could change and help the way someone else acted and thought.
Yeah.
And, I think we need to learn also to be more empathetic. I really do think everybody's on their own journey. I'm not always perfect, and I've made mistakes. I'm sure I've, done things that have hurt people also. And I think it's just so important to just be more kind in this world. It's so easy to judge. I'm sure there are lots of people that have judged and criticized me.
Yeah.
But everyone's on their own journey, and I really believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that if we are kinder and just forgive people more, I think it just makes, the world a better place. I know that sounds corny.
Yeah.
But I really do think that everybody always has something that's going on that you don't know.
Absolutely. Did the sport of short track give you a certain sense of responsibility because you became you had some level of limelight shone on you because you were representing Malaysia, and you were doing it really well? Did you feel that the sport and just you being a figure in that sport give you an opportunity to, be more vocal about women's rights, about equality in sports, etc.?
For sure. So I had this experience going into the SEA Games a few years back where it was just such a harrowing experience. There was so much politics leading up to it, from the then association, people in, power were saying, if you don't do this, then we're like threatening to like kill me, to do all kinds of things. They were trying to play all kinds of mind games, rearrange.
Sorry, literally kill you, or was that just a threat?
Just a threat.
Okay.
And
wow.
And then I had a, big blow up with my coach at the time, who was, trying to throw stuff at me and, was screaming at me. And there was just this whole big blow up. And this was the night before I was supposed to compete. And it was one of the hardest experiences I had in the sport. And I was just so emotionally and mentally exhausted. And I remember that morning thinking, I could either let these people win and let them affect me, or I can, for this time, put everything aside and just go out and do what I'm meant to be doing. And, it was so hard because I remember that if I had to move past the situation, obviously I had to communicate with my coach, and if I decided to be mad and hold that anger, I would be the one that would suffer.
Right.
And that's why I got so emotional after I won my first gold medal in that first event, because so many things and so many people had tried to take that away from me. And I think on that day, physically, I was nowhere near my best. But mentally, I knew that I had no other choice. not no other choice in the sense that, but from a perspective of, in my head, there was no other option than to win. And because I went in with that mindset, there was so much conviction into what I knew I had to do that was what happened.
Yeah.
You know? And I think also moving on from that experience, it was so important to me to share that story. I think in Asia, we're taught to keep a lot of these things in and to put on this, you know, great facade. And it's so important in our culture to show face.
Yeah.
And to present a good front. But, you know, I've shared my story and I got such overwhelming feedback from so many people. And if it can change the way one person feels or the way they move forward or feel like they're a little bit less alone in this world,
Yeah.
that to me is worth that experience.
Yeah.
You know, and it's okay that, you know, this perhaps maybe injustice happened to me, because if it can help one or two people, or it can make them feel a little bit better, or change the way that they operate or that they think towards certain situations, then that is worth it. And
Yeah.
so I think that those things were meant to be, because it changed me and it changed the way I think about things.
Yeah. Yeah, good. I mean, good for you for calling a spade, because most people would just, you know, take it, because a lot of us, I would say, like we are afraid to speak out, not because we were afraid of the repercussions of it, but more because in an Asian culture, we are taught to not burn bridges.
Mm-hmm.
And so because we don't want to burn a bridge that might, you know, inevitably come back and help us at some point, we're like, you know, okay, fine, I'll let this one slide. But I think more and increasingly, because opportunities are plenty, it gives us a bit more, it should at least give us a bit more strength to call out what we see as injustice.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, I think that there are two things I want to break down from what you've mentioned that I think would really help our listeners. Number one, you know, the thing you were talking about was in 2017, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was when you won the 500, 1,000 and 3,000 meters
Mm-hmm.
ladies relays. Now, you went through all of that, and you talked about how even though physically you were not in that you were not at your best, you know, you were focused mentally. Maybe you could share with you how you got yourself locked in and how you managed to really focus your mind so that you could, you know, achieve those 3 gold medals.
Mm-hmm. I mean, first I wanted to circle back to a bit the comment you made about burning bridges.
Yeah.
And, you know, it definitely stresses me out. And I remember when I first spoke out, I remember before I did that, I was thinking, you know, I don't want to give any ill will to those people, because I really think that in their own way, they were doing the best they can. And that was their capacity at the time. You know, for whatever reason, they were trying their best, and that was what they could give. And so I don't hold any negativity to those people. And, you know, there is a certain sense of stress, or maybe guilt when I talk about these things, because I really don't want those people in my life to be hurt. But I do think that speaking out about it, and the people that do connect with what I say or do feel a little sense that, you know, maybe they're a little bit less alone and that these things do happen or whatever it is, and that is more important. And yeah, and so moving on to what you were saying about, you know, the sense of conviction, I think because of everything that had happened, I almost had this fuel, right? It wasn't just about a medal. For everyone else, it was just about a medal in a competition. And to me, it was so much more. It was more about rising up to everyone that had tried to bring me down. And for myself, it was a personal statement to be like, you've done all these things to try and bring me down, but you can't. And, I'm still going to be here and I'm still going to be standing. And moving on from that experience, it was very interesting moving on, because I think with a lot of people just look at situations and they see, okay, that was a hard situation. Now it's done. It's over. But life doesn't operate like that.
Yeah.
Things don't happen in silos, and things don't just happen and then you can put them away in boxes and move on. And I remember thinking that, okay, these medals were great, but was it really worth it? And I remember feeling at the time that it wasn't. And that was not to say that I was ungrateful. I was so grateful for the experience and so honored to hold those medals and those titles. And me and the other athletes had worked so hard. And that's not to discount that. But because of all the negative and painful experience that had happened, I didn't feel that sense of joy, and I didn't feel that sense of joy when I got all those things because of the things that had happened. And so I took some time away from the sport to heal. It took me a while to even think about the sport that I loved because I didn't feel that love anymore. And so I went out into, the working world, and I worked for just over a year. And then I missed it again because at the core of it, I just loved the sport and I loved what I was doing. So I went back into the sport and moved towards the last SEA Games. And it wasn't the outcome that I'd hoped for. Obviously, I'm a, competitive person and everybody goes in wanting to do their best and win these gold medals. And I didn't have a clean sweep like I did last time.
Yeah.
But despite all that, it was the best experience of my life. And I had people that came up to me and said, don't you regret it? Because you won all these medals and now you came back and now you can't say you're, this overall winner and it's, ruined your image or whatever. And I think it was a mistake.
Yeah.
And genuinely, I can tell you that that was the best experience of my life because I remember after my first event, obviously not getting that gold medal, that was tough. And I went away and I cried and I said, I just need my moment to be upset because this is painful and it's an upsetting experience. And, again, moving on to my next event. But I remember going up to my coach and I said, look, no matter what happens and what I feel, I want you to make sure that when I come back, that I have all my, family and friends around me and that we celebrate. Because I came back wanting to enjoy this experience and that was all it was about. I'd gotten the medals and I'd gotten that, so to say, prestige, and that wasn't why I was here. And I want to make sure that I do this because I love the sport and I'm enjoying it. And I remember coming back and just being so happy. And I remember thinking, in this moment, I am so beyond blessed because there are not many people that could have had what happened to them and still feel so happy. And I was so happy because I had so much love around me. And if you have that love around you, I remember thinking, the worst happened that I thought could happen, and I'm still happy.
Yeah.
So no matter what life throws at me, it'll be okay and I can get through it.
Yeah.
And that is such a powerful feeling.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think well done because not only did you redefine what success was in that games, because at the end of the day, because you had a clean sweep in your previous outing, there might have been all those expectations, but you understood the value of loving the sport and making sure you had fun, and you defined it in that way, and you accomplished it. And I think that's a really important lesson for all of us, that no matter what the natural metric of success is in whatever it is you're doing, you can still redefine it for yourself, because technically the gold medal was the metric of success in that sport.
For sure.
But you told yourself, no, not for me. For me, it was important to have fun and to make sure I continue to love that sport. And I think that's like a valuable advice. But would you agree with that, or am I
Yeah, completely. Yeah. I mean, that experience really made me realize, I guess, what the importance of gratitude is. And I'd always known it was important. And to me, it's something that I wake up and do every morning, because gratitude is one of those things where you can feel lots of conflicting emotions at the same time. You can be happy and mad, or happy and sad, or whatever it is, but you can't feel gratitude, truly be grateful, and feel a negative emotion.
Gotcha.
And so it's something I practice every morning anyways. But this moment really made me realize to be grateful for having love in my life. And I think so often we overlook it. If you just have one person in your life that loves you, that is the most important thing in this world, really. And most people don't even have that. I was, self-reflecting, and I realized that, on that day, there were so many other people that needed it more than me. I didn't need those things to be happy anymore. And I had so much love in my life. And, not many people could have said the same.
Yeah.
And so I came away with so much more than those medals for me. And I wouldn't take back that experience for the world.
Right. I think this is a great segue to a question I wanted to ask, because prior to this interview, I just went on your website and I just looked up stuff, and there was a blog post that you wrote, and something there really hit me, and I thought I wanted to discuss it with you, because you wrote about how the best athletes in the world know when it's time to give up, or when they should give up. Tell us why it's an important thing to know.
So I think I use that word because I think it's very triggering, where it really strikes a chord with people. But what I really meant by that is that, it's so important to learn when to step away from something when something is no longer right for you. And, for me, I stepped away from the sport because it was no longer something that was right for me at the time. It wasn't helping me to grow. I wasn't learning anything from it, and it wasn't becoming better from it. And if I had continued on that trajectory, I wouldn't have gained in the same way that I have. And, so many times I think when you really want something, you're so close to something, it is so hard to see things from a different perspective. And it's just learning to, even with a business, oftentimes you're working so hard towards something, or towards a goal, or to a promotion. And because you're so dogged in your focus that you can't see other ways around it, right? So, you're going towards something and you want this and you're trying, but you're just trying the same things. And it's learning to pivot and be trying different things to get there. Because, what's that quote like? If you keep trying the same thing and it's not working, that's what stupidity is, or something like that, right? And, it's not to, necessarily say give up on your dreams, but just realize that there's a different path forward. I heard someone talk about how, there was this guy and he, got mixed up think he was from America. He got mixed up in drugs and all of those things. And he, went to prison, and, his goal was to get to the Olympics.
Yeah.
And, he worked super hard, and he ended up getting an injury. And he continued to, coach people and be involved in the sport. And he ended up going as a coach.
Yeah.
And obviously, the story is much more nuanced than that. But the big takeaway was that, the goal can remain, but sometimes there's a different way to get there.
Yeah.
So his goal was the Olympics. And so maybe it wasn't going as an athlete, but it was going as a coach.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes stepping away from that situation to be able to have that kind of foresight, I guess, to see that.
Yeah. And I think for me, what I noticed about athletes, but maybe in general for all of us, the reason why we struggle to give up is because we tend to tie it to our identity, and we really glue it to our identity and keep it so strongly and close to our chest. And I think that's a problem that I think we also need to speak up more. Like whatever we think we defines us, be it whether we're an athlete or whether we're this star student or investment banker or whatever it may be. When things end for you, it's okay to walk away and pivot to something else, because at the end of the day, who you are is not what you do. And I think that needs to be said a lot more.
And I think life is a journey. And okay, I know that sounds really cliche and corny, but in the sense that you are not made up of one moment, and it is not that one moment that defines you. You are defined by a collection of moments and experiences.
Yeah.
And I really think that the purpose and goal that people have in life is to constantly be growing and improving. And if you measure yourself in that metric, as long as you're constantly learning from your experiences and growing, learning how to do things better and progressing in that sense, then you have succeeded.
Right.
And it is not about, getting that job or having the right job. And I admit, because I also grew up in this Asian society, that's been imprinted on me. So oftentimes I catch myself, thinking, if I hadn't done sport and I'd, come out of university and I'd started this career track, this is where I would be. But, does that salary define me? Or, what is it that, I'm pegging to success? Is it, being 5 years into that job? Okay, so then I, think, what is it really about that I'm pegging to? And for a lot of us, it really is that salary. But then it's like, okay, so, say I'm earning that extra, however much, what does that give me? Okay, it gives me, I guess, just extra spending money.
Yeah.
Do I need that money? Would I really be spending that anyways? Not really. It would just be going to savings.
Yeah.
That's great. And that's so important to have savings and to have that safety net. But we live in this world, I think, all the time where you're looking at this next best option. And there are so many choices and opportunities out there, that we're in this age of, I guess, overconsumption, and you want all these things and you think you need to have more. But I think after a certain point, your life doesn't change. I do agree that, having a good, financial support is so important, having that safety net, having a certain amount. I think below a certain amount of money, you can't fulfill your needs and maybe some of your, wants. But beyond that, does that extra, $1,000 that I would have gotten from, being in the industry a little bit longer, what would that really give and bring to me? And if you start to think about it from that vein, I think a lot of people can say not much. A lot of people aspire to be, a millionaire, or, they look at all these, billionaires and all these celebrities. And I think if someone were to give them that extra money, would their life really change? Yes, on the surface. But I think deep down, the way you feel and think does not change.
Yeah.
If you have somebody that's unhappy and you give them an extra billion dollars even,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you still come back home to yourself.
Yeah.
That, money maybe they can use to fill their day with distractions, but at night they still have to come back to themselves and the way they think and feel and perceive and the love they have in their life, that doesn't change.
Yeah.
And so does it change your happiness? Not really.
And how would you define or measure when it's time to give up or when it's time to stick on and persevere through? How do you define it?
I think when you're not growing anymore, and yes, to a certain point, perseverance is so important with everything. I think perseverance is so much more important than, say, talent or intelligence. And there's so much to be said for people that really do work hard and keep going. And so it's not about giving up per se in the strict sense of the word. It's about being smart, right? Working hard and persevering, but being smart about your choices. So for example, if you lead it back to sport, it's not just going out every day and, running thousands of kilometers. That's not going to make me a better athlete, right?
Yeah.
So it's about directing your energy in the right manner. So work hard, but understand where that is going and making sure that all your efforts are in the right direction.
Got it. That's amazing. I wanna also ask this question that I ask as many of my guests as possible, if I'm able to weave it in, of course. And this time I can. What would the Anja of today tell the Anja who's just getting into competitive short track? What would you tell her in order for her to see greater or more satisfying success in your eyes, not anyone else's?
Well, I think, first of all, maybe what I would say to myself looking back would be to be patient and have faith in everything. And grace in the sense that understanding that the things that are meant to be and right for you in your life will come into your life when you need them to be. That's hard. I'm a sprinter. Patience is not my strong suit.
Yeah.
And I like to have the mentality, I've worked hard. Okay, it needs to come now.
Yeah.
And life doesn't work like that. But I think, how I define success now is very much through love and being kind. Kind on myself first. That is very important. And I think that's actually the thing that people struggle the most with. You see someone that's struggling or, they are meeting a certain challenge.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you wouldn't give the same advice you give to your best friend. They're going through something and you're like, it's okay. It'll take time. This is not what defines you. And you never see them through the lens of failure or, criticism. But yet you would never give that same, grace to yourself and kindness to yourself.
It's true. Yeah.
And the love and the kindness starts with yourself first. And learning that, if you have that love and kindness to yourself first, then you'll give that out to other people. And the way you live your life will be different. And the opportunities that you will get and experience will be so much different and change the way you are. And, success is not, one moment, but it is the way you go through living your life. And I think that is something that I'm still working on, because it is so easy to peg your success to a certain moment or a certain job title or whatever it is. And, I still have my moments. I don't wake up every day and I'm like, the sun is shining and life is great and nothing will ever go wrong.
Yeah.
That's not the case. But it's learning to be kind in the way I'm thinking, right? So I have negative thoughts and, I think critically of other people sometimes, or I think mean things and I do make mistakes and, I don't always do the right thing. But it is learning, to just be kind.
Yeah.
I'm doing the best that I can just as much as, everyone else at the time is doing the best they can.
Yeah.
And as long as I continue to be kind on myself and others, I think that's the most important thing.
That's awesome. It's and it's so true what you say, because I remember when I was like going through like those difficult periods of like clinical depression and etc. And you would think it would be, it was particularly difficult and something I probably wouldn't want to go through again. But I think now every time I go through those like difficult periods in my life, I'm like, all right, well, I suddenly feel very energized to solve problems because, I had to dig myself out of a bigger hole once. And I think a lot of that really comes with patience. And I really agree with what you say over there, because every time when I rushed solving a problem, or whether it was my recovery from mental health issues, I always faltered. But whenever I was patient with myself, that journey to solving the problem was a lot smoother and ironically a lot faster. So I take that to heart.
And I think it's not about lying to yourself. So, for example, if you take a lot of women in their self-image, right? And maybe I am bigger. And a lot of people look in themselves and they say, the new trend now is to look in yourself and positive talk and positive affirmation, which is so important. But sometimes it's, it's not looking in the mirror and being like, I'm skinny and gorgeous, because maybe you're not there yet. And so I think what I've started trying to say to myself is, and it's okay. So whatever it is you're thinking, maybe I'm healthy, but I'm not where I want to be. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that just helps to reframe the way you have this conversation with yourself.
Absolutely.
And you might not be where you want to be. And it's not about saying, pretending and trying to lie to yourself that, okay, this is all great and it's all rainbows and sunshines and it's fine and I'm happy with the situation.
Yeah.
It's okay to not be happy with your situation and not be where you want to be. As long as you learn to be kinder in the way you are talking to yourself and how you're framing your perspective, then the way you move through and operate is also completely different.
Yeah. And I also want to share something that someone taught to me, and I guess it's for the listeners as well, but just in case it's of some value to you as well. Whenever we go through like those difficult times, now, because I was taught that, I learned that the boundary isn't time, it's objective. So never peg solving the problem with time, like, I give myself 3 months, I give myself a year, nothing like that. It should be more focused on the objective. So for example, if it's for me to be healthier, then it's all right, my objective is to run a 5K at least once a week. So don't limit that to time, like how long it would take, but more like, that's the objective. Let's see what it takes to get there. And I think that has become really immensely helpful for me, because I don't feel so much pressure anymore. Like, I'm just competing against myself to be the best that I can be. And I don't know, that perspective really changed, how I deal with it.
I completely agree. Like, I think it's so important to, set small and big goals. So, put your big goal up there, but also it's so important to have small, constant, achievable goals. Things that you know that are stepping stones along the way. But to take it one step further, I think it's about building the habit. So creating the goals in terms of, for example, if, weight loss is something that you want to achieve, rather than thinking about it of, okay, I'm going to starve myself and I want to be losing 1 kg every week, for example. It's thinking, okay, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to build habits into my life. So, maybe starting from this week, I'm going to try to exercise for 5 minutes today. Everybody can do 5 minutes. No matter what it is, don't tell me you don't have time for 5 minutes. But the more you set those habits in, so then next week it's like, okay, I'm going to try to be exercising twice a week for 5 minutes each.
Yeah.
And starting with these small habits that you create into your life and becomes a part of your life and the way you want to live. So again, if it's weight loss, for example, it is, okay, I'm going to learn to be eating, more vegetables. So maybe I'll have, one meal where it's all vegetables.
Yeah.
And that's it. And it's about, reframing your thought process and the thought pattern around how you achieve these goals, because if you think, okay, a lot of people, they talk about losing weight, but it's understanding, okay, weight loss. So maybe it is a health reason.
Yeah.
Maybe it is, if I don't lose this weight, I'm at risk of a heart attack by the time I hit, 40, for example. And if that's the case, then that's great. But I think if a lot of people step back, that is not the real reason. A lot of times it's like, I want to, lose 10 kg. Why? Because I think I'll be prettier. Why do I think I'll be prettier? It's because, and then when you go down, you boil it down, you really see what are the reasons for these things that you want in life and these goals that you want to achieve. And then when you work back, you can realize, okay, so maybe the root cause is, I actually just, need to love myself more, or the way I, think of how people perceive me or something else, So, even with a job, it's going back and distilling, okay, what do I really want from this? And then it's building habits into your life to make that progress.
Yeah.
So like you said, it's realizing that success is not this destination and this specific metric, right?
Yeah. So, final question. You've done the sport thing, short track. What's next for Anja?
So it was interesting because at the time when I was doing full-time skating, I sort of came into this opportunity where I noticed this product. And first of all, it was something that I just wanted in my life.
Yeah.
And then I, realized it was a great opportunity. So it was just something I built because I really loved the product and I really wanted to understand how to build a business. And so I have this company called Alopotentia. And what we do is we make these like crossbody strap phone cases,
right?
Because women never have pockets, unlike men. And, even if you do have pockets, they often don't hold your phone.
Yeah.
But in this day and age, we are so connected to technology that I found that I was always, holding my phone.
Yeah.
And so it's been an interesting adventure. And circling back, it's been hard because doing something that very much goes out of the frame of a traditional career, it's been hard on myself, on other people looking in. For example, for parents to understand what I'm trying to do, and to respect this different path that I've taken. But I really think that, like you said, it's about growth and really doing something I'm passionate in. Before I really felt like I was doing something where I wasn't growing and moving forward.
Right.
And, I'm only 25, and I'm not ready to be doing something where I'm feeling stagnant and something that I'm not passionate in.
Yeah.
And
Nor should you ever.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had the choice, of course.
And despite it being difficult, it's so hard to work by yourself and for yourself.
For sure.
And in something that has really taken time and really taken patience. But it's something that I love. It's something I really believe in. In building the company, it's been so important for me to build it on the ethos of things I really believe in. So empowering people and women, but also sustainability. And, I think sustainability is such a hot topic at the moment. And there's so much pressure to be perfect in this world of sustainability.
Yeah.
And I think of it very differently. We're not perfect. We don't have any outside investors. We don't have big money. We can't do everything. But it's so important to me to be transparent. So I'm very transparent to, our consumers about, how are we being sustainable? What is this really doing? What are we doing? And what are we not doing yet that we hope to do, but we're not perfect?
Yeah.
And creating a knowledgeable customer so that they really understand how we're sustainable, what sustainability even means. And, we're just trying to do our part. And it is okay to not be doing everything. I think especially with, being environmentally friendly and sustainability, there's so much talk about, say single-use plastic or, for example, for me, I try as much as I can to cut back on, animal products. And I'm not vegan. And there's so much judgment in the world, like, oh, you can't say that, you're into animal rights and loving animals, but then you eat meat. I think it's just doing whatever you can.
Yeah.
If that means, eating, less meat for that one day. Or if that means, you do your recycling or, you try as much as you can to reduce plastic or reduce consumption. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to, say that, you're very passionate about the environment and then, never use any other mode of transport and walk everywhere again,
Right.
Just do as much as you can. And, try to spread and help people to do as much as they can.
Got it. And if the listeners want to check out Alopotentia, how can they do so?
So they can either go to our social media, which is at Alopotentia. So that's ALOPOTENTIA,
Got it.
or www.alopotentia.com.
Cool. Yeah.
And
I'll link the description so they'll be
what
able to find it.
Alopotentia actually means is to, help to support. And so aloe means, to support, and potentia means like all your potential.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's so nice.
So
Yeah.
it's, I think for all of us to help people to support each other to reach whatever our best potential is.
Yeah.
And that's really what I think is the best measure of being successful.
Awesome. Well, I wish Alopotentia nothing but success.
Thank you so much.
Anja, it's been a pleasure having you on this podcast. And if nothing else, I'm positive that our listeners would have gotten some ideas on how to persevere, to stay focused, and just to be resilient through difficult times, just as you have. So thank you.
I'm so grateful and honored that you invited me here to talk to you and have this conversation. And also super grateful to anyone that's, made it to the end.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to us. And, I think time is so important, precious. So, I'm so honored that, you've taken the time to spend it with me.
Sweet. Thanks,
Thank
Anja.
you so much. Thank 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 you so much.